Hello and welcome to the Women of Nottingham podcast by Majatu, the podcast where we focus on the remarkable and diverse stories of women in the city of Nottingham. This week, I've got a really exciting interview with a woman named Avarni. She founded an initiative in Nottingham called FlyGirl, and FlyGirl unapologetically connects and empowers women of all shades while prioritising those of colour. I spoke to her a little bit about that, why it's important that we get more women into the creative industry, and all about Nottingham's creative endeavours and why it's a great city to be in the music industry, creative industry, or anything along those lines. Enjoy.
So my name is Avarni Bilan. I am a creative producer in Nottingham. My background is it was in marketing, and before that it was in fashion supply. The lines kind of bled a little bit later on in my career, and then last year I went self-employed as I've been working for my partner's company, which is called womxn, and it's a music and event series in Nottingham. We do an annual festival which is spread across 15 different venues in the city, and we get loads of different DJs and musicians from across the world, really. As a result of COVID, events took a bit of a dip, so I decided to focus on FlyGirl, which is something that I'd been thinking about for a really long time, but didn't really have the time to kind of put into it. So that's where I'm kind of at now.
And can you explain to our listeners a little bit about what FlyGirl is and what you guys do?
Yeah, so FlyGirl is essentially, it's changing form a lot, to be honest with you. It from what my original ideas were for it, it's kind of growing and developing as the needs of the community are changing. So essentially it's a platform for women to connect with one another professionally and personally. And we really just want to put women together that will empower and inspire one another, and women that can also teach each other different skills. So primarily we're looking at working with individuals and business owners who are looking to kind of in some way develop themselves. So a business may come to us and say that they need support reaching their kind of target audience, and then we can link them in with somebody that we think could support them with that. So it might be a marketing professional or like maybe an e-commerce specialist. We've got a huge network of people that are really women who are really keen to support other women. They're all at quite high levels of their career, and I think a lot of them are kind of industry leaders. So on a professional level, we want to hook them up with other women that can support their businesses. But then also on a personal level, I'm really passionate about, I kind of, spoke a little bit about my own sort of journey going into becoming self-employed. And I'm passionate about helping women who are maybe creatively minded or entrepreneurial or have ideas that are great, but just need a bit of a push to make that their full-time job, or to, even maybe just start earning money from it at all. If there's an individual who needs anything, we're also looking at connecting them better with the community. So in the same way as, it might be a woman that's got her own business, but there's some area that she's not able to run herself. Maybe she'd love to become a photographer so that she can better sort of represent her hobby. And so we can then hook her up with a photographer who can support her and teach her different things. So we do one-to-one mentorship, we do group sessions, we do workshops, we do loads of different things.
And I didn't know about this until a few weeks ago when I came across you guys. And I think it's such an important initiative for various reasons. Why do you think it's so important to encourage women into a creative space? Because I think the creative industry is sometimes seen as sort of this unattainable goal. It seems sort of, how do I get from here to there? And perhaps maybe even more so for women.
I completely agree with everything you've said there, and I think that really hits the nail on the head for me. My career has developed over the years. I'm working in a job that is primarily music-led, and I'm talking about my wigflex work here, but it's primarily music and art-led, and that's not something that I don't have a background in it, but I'm really good at it because there are skills that I've got from my previous jobs that I've developed over the years that make me really good and really suitable for this job. And I think women in particular really, they put themselves down. They don't necessarily believe in themselves as much as I think they could. And that's myself included. And I just really wanted to create a space where women could be inspired by other women and this whole notion of imposter syndrome, we can kind of work on it together, because I think we don't kind of give ourselves enough credit for what we're good at. And I've learned, definitely sort of jumping fields professionally, I've learned that there are so many strong skills that, you know, whatever your industry is, whatever your background is, we pick up such strong skills in areas that we don't necessarily acknowledge. And that if you've got a passion for going into something like the creative arts, I mean, it is quite difficult to get into it in a traditional sense. The university route doesn't necessarily lead into the arts. College routes don't always lead into the arts. They don't tend to lead to jobs necessarily. I don't think the sort of pathway to employment is as straightforward for creative jobs, which is why I think people get put off by it, women in particular. But I think if you can start as an individual, if you can start kind of realising what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then look at what you really love and what you're really passionate about, I think there's always huge, opportunities and potential to actually jump careers and move into industries that you maybe don't think that you're 100% suited to, because more often than not, you've probably got some really valuable skills that do transfer into that space as well.
Definitely. And I think imposter syndrome is such a big issue when promoting women in various spaces. Do you think you've experienced it in your career?
Yeah, I think there's that. I've always felt a fine line between trying to establish, is it imposter syndrome, or do I need to upskill myself? Mm-hmm. Is there like some kind of area that I could be better in, but I'm not? And I think it comes hard. I mean, I'm a woman of colour, and I primarily, FlyGirl works to support women of colour, but, we're as focused on supporting Caucasian women and, white women that feel that their values are similar to ours. But I think especially imposter syndrome can be really, really difficult, as a woman of colour. I think it's just, I personally feel like I've been experiencing imposter syndrome from day one, and it's kind of, more often than not, it's been a result of the colour of my skin. It's how I felt internally. I've never really felt that I was possibly as good or as qualified or as worthy as maybe the kind of white women around me. And I think that's something that a lot of women of colour have experienced in one way or another. I've managed to grow out of that, and because I've been surrounded by some really strong, powerful women that have sort of made me see the light, if you know what I mean. But I think it's really easy to fall into a lull of thinking that you're not up to scratch, really. And I think, I've definitely experienced it myself. I know so many other women who have experienced it, and I just want FlyGirl to, more than anything, just to kind of be a safe space for women to come, whether you're a woman of colour or not. And we can combat imposter syndrome together, because, I mean, we all know it. Even within our friendship groups, whenever you're thinking something that maybe you're not as great at, your friend will probably see you in a completely different light and will be singing your praises. So I just wanted to create a community of women that are all working to achieve that, really.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, because what you've just said about having a community to support you, whether that be friends or whether it be more widely, FlyGirl to me seems to be just built on this idea of women supporting women and there being a community there. So I'm glad you mentioned about the fact that you prioritise women of colour. Can you tell me a little bit about why that was a focus for you? Was it because you're a woman of colour, or did you feel that perhaps there was a need for more women in the industry from those backgrounds?
I think, definitely when I thought of the idea of FlyGirl, for it to be authentic to me, I think it had to always represent women of colour. Proportionately, we are less represented in, the wider media, in a lot of women's facing kind of business support communities and networking spaces. I felt that I've kind of got involved in previously, they've been focused on the white experience. And I just thought, being a woman of colour, obviously I know all of the trials and tribulations that I've gone through in my life. A lot of my other friends who are also women of colour, we just have a different set of experiences, I think. There are different things. There's not anyone that is more or less worthy of attention or recognition or any of that. And I want to make that really clear with everything that I'm doing. But I think there are fewer spaces where women of colour can authentically be represented and their experiences are kind of heard and appreciated. And so I just really wanted to focus on that. And I think also myself, I mean, I studied fashion marketing at uni, and that is kind of, it's not super creative. It's not, it's kind of an in-between. And my parents at the time, you know, being from an Asian background, they just didn't understand it at all. And it made no sense to them. And they were really supportive and it was great in the end. But I mean, really, most Asian families, I would say, are not understanding of the arts. So I thought there really is a space that's needed to encourage women of colour to pursue careers in the arts, because there's this kind of misconception that if you work in the arts, you won't get paid, you'll be working for free, and it's a struggle. And for a lot of artists, that is the case. But I think there are also ways that you can go about it that don't kind of operate in that way. And I think to encourage women and let them know how they can go about a creative career in a more sustainable way is something that I definitely feel like I can support women with. So that's kind of why I wanted to focus on women of colour. And, you know, being in the arts anyway, I just thought I probably have quite a lot of experiences that I can share. And, you know, like I was talking about previously about the network of people that I've got around me, we've got a really strong network of people. And I know that a lot of women of colour who are kind of put off by working in the creative arts, a lot of the time it's because they feel like maybe it's just not attainable to them. They don't know anybody that's followed a similar career path. So I just wanted to get a bunch of people together that could, you know, really represent the creative industry strongly, professionally, with empathy as well. And we can all share experiences together and just push forward in a really positive way.
And I'm so glad that something like this exists in Nottingham, because it's so sorely needed. And say there's a woman, maybe she comes from a family that doesn't really understand the creative industry, she's never really got much background in it, and doesn't really know where to go next with it, but has some talent, knows she wants to do it. How does FlyGirl support her? How does somebody listening now go from that?
That's a really good question, actually. And it's something that I've kind of struggled to maybe get across sometimes in my kind of presence on social media, because it's a bit of a complex one. So we do it in a few different ways, depending on the level of where you're kind of at with your practice. So at the moment, I'm finding that I'm working with a lot of people who are working kind of normal jobs, if I can put it that way, and then they've got a creative passion that they're kind of working on the side, and they want to turn that into a kind of money making possible, you know, career place for them to develop their career in. So for people like that, we're working with them on a one-to-one basis. So I'll sit down with them, we go through where they're at professionally, personally. You know, it might be that they actually really want to keep their job, and they just want to develop some skills to make their creative practice kind of a bit richer, in which case we will then look, as I mentioned before, maybe it's something like photography or marketing. So we can then hook them up with people that are industry leaders in that field who can support them with that. And where possible, we really like to do all of this work for free. We don't want to charge people through the roof for it. We don't really want to charge anyone anything for any of these services. And the initial consultation is always free. Depending on what avenue you want to take after that, there may be some costs incurred, but they are always like as low as they can possibly be. And then the other side of it is maybe there's a woman who absolutely has no experience of their sort of creative passion, and they just want advice. Maybe they, you know, we can put kind of a plan together and structurally go through the steps that they may need to take to eventually get to where they want to be creatively or professionally. So I'm very strategy based. I like to forward plan. Everyone that comes to me, my first thing is, you know, I ask them, what's your 5-year plan? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? I think sometimes as well, it's really the feedback that I've got so far with all the work that I've been doing with women in Nottingham is they kind of know all the things that they need to be doing, but they just need to sit with somebody else to kind of pick it all out and break some of it down. And then I can interject my own knowledge and my own experience into that to come out with a really structured plan that's, really rich, really comprehensive. And then we can work with you to make sure that you stay on track for the next goals and targets that you've got. So it's a little bit like life coaching as well. Some people are coming for, purely personal development stuff. So we're, able to support with that as well. We've got a lot of wellbeing professionals that are on board with FlyGirl who are happy to support anybody that's looking to develop themselves personally as well as professionally.
And I think in a similar way to how I love doing this podcast. So I just feel so lucky to be able to talk to amazing women about their stories and what they do. I feel like you do that on steroids because you just get to experience and make connections with so many talented women in Nottingham. That must be amazing.
Yeah, completely. I mean, a lot of people think I'm bonkers because I do all of this for free. I really don't. I'm not getting paid for it in any way, shape, or form. Any money that comes in, it goes straight back into providing workshops or group classes or maybe marketing and promotion just to get that message spread further so that more women can engage with us. But I definitely don't take a fee for anything that I do, and at no point has that felt weird for me. Like I really, really love doing this. And I think one thing that I find is a personal strength of mine is being able to kind of put plans in place. I love a spreadsheet more than anything. And I really enjoy kind of that process of, I also love, individual people's stories. I love hearing about what people are doing, what they enjoy doing. If I could help them kind of, just kind of access their dreams or, be where they want to be, like that for me is just such a great thing on a personal level for me. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like work at all. And I'm also, I need to kind of say that I'm in a fortunate position that the work that I've got that does pay my way, it isn't something that I'm doing 9 to 5. It's quite sporadic. So I can, be working not every day of the week, basically on that. I might work a solid week out of a month and then have work that trickles throughout the rest of the month. So I do have time that I can dedicate to this. And I know that not everybody has that luxury. So I'm super fortunate to be in a position that I can, really spend time doing stuff like this.
And it's so exciting to see where this goes and where all the women that you support end up. And I'm sure that we'll be seeing some great success stories in the coming year. Why do you think it was needed in Nottingham? What about Nottingham is particularly creative? In earlier podcasts, we've talked about how Nottingham is wonderful. And if you live in Nottingham, you know how special it is. But sometimes nationally it kind of gets forgotten. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, my partner and I, we always have this conversation. It's like most of our friends are London based, and obviously we've got a great network of friends in Nottingham too, but most of our friends are kind of down south. And they all, like a lot of them who don't know Nottingham, some of them have lived in Nottingham so they get it, but a lot of them who have never lived in Nottingham, they just don't understand it. It's like this mythical place up like really far north that they just don't really understand why we're so committed to staying here. But I think there are so many different reasons that Nottingham is great for us. I mean, I think in terms of FlyGirl, the reason that I wanted to do something in Nottingham that was focused on Nottingham women is because not a lot of similar things, but I was seeing kind of women's networking groups that were based in London. And I thought there's absolutely no reason why we should, we can't have something like that here. And I kind of thought that I know enough creatives in Nottingham. I mean, for me, Nottingham just feels like the most creative city ever because everyone that I connect with is creatively, they're working in the creative arts, they're creatively minded. But that also could just be that I'm kind of in a creative little bubble because of the work that I do. So I think one thing is that I really want to share with maybe the wider Nottingham community how many great creative businesses, individuals and sort of organisations that we've got that are bubbling away in Nottingham. Because the sort of thing that gets said again and again is that Nottingham creatives are really bad at shouting about themselves. And I think that's true. I think everyone that's creative in Nottingham really just likes to kind of go about and do their own thing, but they don't really like to necessarily share or boast about what they're doing. But I think there's some really, really amazing kind of industry leading creatives that are living in Nottingham doing amazing things, and they've chosen to stay here for sort of similar reasons to myself. So I think to share that message is really important on a wider scale, and just to, going back to, again, what I was talking about earlier with encouraging women to get into the arts. I feel like there's so many inspiring women who are doing creative things in Nottingham. So if we can connect, these women with those women, then that would be great. And just to let people know that, Nottingham is super creative. There's loads and loads going on here. I think virtually, obviously we're in the music world, but, visual arts as well, we're really well connected to. And there's just so much. It surprises me kind of every day how little people really understand of the creative network that's in Nottingham.
Definitely. And there's so much going on. And I'd really like to pick up what you said about Nottingham artists or creatives perhaps not being able to shout about what they do. And I think that stereotypically, whether it's correct or not, is something that has been attached to sort of women. Is that something you've found working with women with FlyGirl?
Definitely. I think that's one thing that I found, that's been really prevalent kind of throughout my time working in the arts, and even before that, actually, when I was working in sort of marketing roles and fashion roles. I think so I also, on the side of FlyGirl and my work with Wigflex, I also help creatives to access public funding. So I might help them with Arts Council grants or, different types of public funding, how they can possibly fund their creative projects. So one of the things that I have found that is literally with every single person that I've spoken to, particularly women, they're really, really kind of not shy of, I don't think it's even a shyness. They're not shy of talking about their successes, but they almost, maybe it links back to the imposter syndrome thing, but they almost don't even think it's worth mentioning a lot of their successes. So I typically will always sit down and kind of my first question will be like, just tell me what have you done? Who have you worked with? Because if you ever ask someone what are your best creative achievements, people kind of don't know, they can't think of what they've really done that's an achievement. But there are so many things. Once you actually start talking to someone and you talk to them for maybe an hour and just ask them loads of random questions about their career, the stuff that comes out, I'll be like, oh my God, you did this. That's amazing. You did this. That's like crazy. Whereas they never would have mentioned that at the beginning when we first talked. So like you have to pluck all this information out of them. And yeah, I find that again and again. And I think that is generally with women, we do tend to do that more, I think, than men. But I think I find definitely for creatives in Nottingham, I think there's almost like this sort of belief that if you've stayed in Nottingham, I mean, we all know that London is the place that jobs are easier to access if you're working in the creative arts. Not easy, but easier. And I think there's this kind of, I don't know, it's a bit of like a Luddite kind of mentality in Nottingham with the creatives. They sort of think that if they're staying in Nottingham, it's like because they just want to focus on their practice. They're not interested in anything else. So, in London, typically you're spending a lot more money just living there, socialising. From my personal experience, I found that the creatives that are living in Nottingham are probably a little bit more serious about what they're doing aside from their finances, because it is a bit cheaper to live here. You may not earn as much money, but I don't know, it gives you the security. I think Nottingham definitely provides creatives with the security to explore their art and their creativity a lot more than if you are in a bigger city, not even London, maybe even Manchester or Bristol. So yeah, I don't know if that even answered your question or if I just went around the houses then.
No, it definitely did. And I think it's just trying to demonstrate how much talent there is in Nottingham, and that, yeah, we need to shout about it more and show that such a wealth of experience and sort of exciting things happening here.
Yeah, completely. I mean, our history in Nottingham, the history of the creatives, our history is really a creative history. We had the lace industry that led the city for, years and years. And that was all, creatively driven. We've got Paul Smith, I think that, the history of Nottingham and creativity just come hand in hand with one another. And to think that has just somehow disappeared now is, it's crazy. I mean, there's so much talent in Nottingham. Like I keep saying, it shocks me more and more kind of every day how little the wider Nottingham community really are aware of it. I don't think that it's easy to shout about it either, because there kind of isn't a platform to necessarily do that. There are some really great Instagram accounts that have popped up in the last few years that I think are sharing the kind of creative independent businesses with the wider Nottingham community a lot more than they were previously. So I think that's made a huge difference because I knew the potential for growth there was quite big.
Alrighty, it all sounds very exciting, but I'm sure you've got more exciting things coming up. What is coming up next for FlyGirl? What can we keep an eye out for?
Yeah, we've got loads, to be honest. I kind of don't know where my head's at most of the time because of it. But I have taken on a new creative building in Nottingham city centre with 4 other business partners, and FlyGirl will be based there. So all events and workshops and talks that I was mentioning earlier, they will all take place here. So the focus has really been on that, and I think that is going to be really, really exciting for Nottingham's creative community. I think it's going to be a great way to connect the wider community with Nottingham's creatives. It's going to be an all-encompassing creative hub. We're going to have an exhibition space, a bar, a restaurant, shops. It's going to be, really, really special. We've got music studios as well. Yeah, it's going to be special. And I think that's kind of all the focus is on that at the moment, and just trying to make that as good as it possibly can be so that as many people can engage with it as possible. And I know that we've talked a lot about the work that I'm doing in the creative community, but FlyGirl really is not limited to the creative arts or creative industries. We've also got a lot of really exciting relationships that we're building with kind of the STEM workforce, so science, technology, areas of industry. So we're really looking to push that more as well. Traditionally, women of colour are less likely to go into STEM roles. So that is kind of an area that we really want to focus on. The art side seems to be coming quite naturally, the creative stuff. We're getting a lot of interest for that, but we're definitely keen to connect more with women who are keen to go into, computer science or anything technology related, coding. Just we're really, really keen to push that a little bit more. So if there's anybody listening that is a woman who is thinking that that's something that they would be interested in, we would love to support them.
Definitely. So all of the links to all of this will be below in the episode bio, so people can go and check out FlyGirl, check out various different things that the wonderful Avarni is doing. And I think this will be a good way of wrapping everything up. Something I ask everybody that I interview for this podcast is, what do you think the most remarkable thing about being a woman is?
That's a really good one. I think the most remarkable thing about being a woman is when you're in a room full of women, or when you have a room full of women, the most amazing things will just come out of it, like all the time. I think the beauty of being a woman is connecting with other women. We share such a deep empathy for one another. I think the, passion to kind of, be closer with one another. I think that is just the most spectacular thing definitely about being a woman, is just being able to connect with other women who are passionate about seeing you grow and, nurturing you, whether that's emotionally or through anything else.
And if you are a woman listening that wants to connect with other women and make wonderful things happen, please do get in touch with FlyGirl, because there's some really exciting things happening right here in Nottingham. Thank you so much for joining me today, Avarni.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that was me speaking to Avarni about her FlyGirl initiative. And that's it for Series 1 of Women of Nottingham. We're taking a Christmas break and we'll be back in the new year, so keep your eyes peeled for when we're speaking to more wonderful women of Nottingham.